Dr. Cam Calder.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start with the underlying premise that the default position of this bill is that freedom camping on public land is allowed subject to the Act. I want to thank the Honourable Rick Barker for his colourful contribution. I think he brought in allusions to Arlo Guthrie's Alice's Restaurant Massacre in a previous contribution. The Honourable Damien O'Connor made a number of contributions, some of them more considered than others, but along with Mr Phil Twyford, I don't feel that they understand the full magnitude of the problem of indiscriminate defecation in our areas of outstanding natural beauty is posing to local residents, local authorities, DOC, and of course the unwary traveller who wants to step out of their van or out of off their motorcycle into a pile of steaming human waste or ordure. And I don't mean to make light of this, Mr. Speaker. This is a significant problem to a large number of communities around our beautiful country. Now, I have, as Mr. Twyford has signalled, I have many times driven through the night, parked at an appropriate spot, ready to get an early start on a tramp or a hunting trip or a fishing trip, and I would be expecting to still be able to do that, Mr. Speaker, because this is basically a tool. It's a tool that we have given councils who have told us they are desperate. The Honourable Marion Street and the Honourable Steve Chadwick admitted in their speech yesterday there is a huge problem here. They knew about the problem. The Mayor's Forum told them about the problem. But what did they do about the problem? Nothing. What did they do about the problem for many, many years? Nothing. We, Mr. Speaker, are doing something to address a major concern to communities and local authorities the length of our country. Mr. Speaker, I'll close with a comment from Lawrence Yule, who said, many communities, and Lawrence Yule is the Local Government New Zealand President, many communities are sick of having to bear the wasteful cost of cleaning up the mess left behind by irresponsible freedom campers. He said while many did not have a freedom camper problem, the bill would be a countrywide tool giving all councils the option to identify areas where camping should be prohibited and enforcement options available. This is a fine tool giving the councils and local authorities and DOC the appropriate methods they need. Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Kevin Haig.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to take a call in this third reading. I'm disappointed to have missed the committee stage because it was clearly a lively debate to which I had many remarks I wished to have contributed. It was very interesting to hear the Minister in her remarks in this third reading speech refer to the consultation process, which she says led to the construction of this bill. What a shame, sir, that process did not involve the trampers, the hunters, the mountain bikers, all of those who actually are going to be so terribly affected by this ridiculous bill. I want to give, I think, 8 main reasons. I raised 5 fingers, sir, but there are another 3. 8 main reasons why this is such a bad bill. The first of those is that it penalises ordinary Kiwis, in fact, for doing things that are actually an important part of our way of life. And we've heard a lot about that in the debate in the House at all stages so far. The second point is the things that this bill penalises are already offences. They're already against the law. So what actually is it about this bill that's going to be more effective than all of the previous penalties, all of the previous offences? There is absolutely nothing. The idea that this will in some way deal with this problem is based on an entirely fanciful notion. It will not work. So the third thing, sir, is that certainly there are some issues associated with a small minority of people who do actually have the camper vans that don't have toilets and park overnight in the location, and there are no suitable facilities there for them. But in those exact same places, there are day visitors who go to those places and who also may get caught short, and it's the absence of facilities that's the problem, not actually the freedom camping activity. This bill does nothing to deal with that problem either. And Rugby World Cup coming along, and there's going to be plenty of day visitors too. The fourth point I wanted to make is one that I made strongly in the second reading debate, and that is this, that it would have been so much better to use a non-regulatory approach to this issue, because regulatory approaches are appropriate in situations where people don't want to comply with the direction that you know is the best one. Not you, sir, but that one knows to be the best one. In this case, visitors to our country actually want to look after our environment. The correct approach is to make that easy for them to do, not to actually penalise them for doing that. And there would have been plenty of other ways to do that, sir. The fifth reason is an important one, and I raised it in the second reading debate, and hoping, I think, that it would have achieved a little bit more media coverage than it got, because here is a problem with this bill, that it gives the impression of validity to the existing territorial local authority provisions related to freedom camping. In fact, sir, the bill does not add any greater legal status to those provisions. And what the Select Committee heard was that in very large number, those provisions that are already enacted by territorial local authorities would be found by a court to be invalid. Because the existing law requires that territorial local authorities pass bylaws about these matters only in those locations where there is a demonstrated problem, and only where the bylaw is the best means available to deal with that problem. And that is not the approach that territorial local authorities have taken, sir. We see territorial local authorities who have imposed blanket bans. And the provision in this bill that says a territorial local authority may not impose a blanket ban is all well and good, but people should recognise that that is just for the sake of clarity. That does not change the requirement that there has to be an actual problem in a specific location. This has to be the best way of dealing with that problem, and the response has to be proportional to the problem. And so what we've seen for the most part is responses that do not meet that formula and that will fail in court as soon as they're challenged. The next point I wanted to come to was the impracticality of this. And again, I'm stupefied to hear from the Minister today in this debate that this bill has emerged as a result of consultation with those who are going to be enforcing it. Because I see this bill as one of the least enforceable that I have seen, and certainly in my time of Parliament and in my time of observing Parliament over many years. This is an impractical bill and will be found to be hard to enforce, or at least hard to enforce without giving the impression to all users of our backcountry and our natural places, Kiwis and visitors alike, of pervading officiousness. And I think that is the culture that we're likely to see emerge as TLAs, territorial local authorities, and the Department of Conservation comes to try and implement this ridiculous bill. The seventh point that I wanted to make is in response to one that the Ministers of Conservation and the Environment, Kate Wilkinson and Nick Smith, made in response to my first reading speech, and Nick Smith made again in his second reading speech, where he appeared completely unable to distinguish between the effects of this extremely small, infinitesimal impact of this particular problem of freedom camping on freshwater quality in New Zealand, and the effect of dairying intensification on freshwater quality in New Zealand. Nick Smith, Minister for the Environment, seemed unable to distinguish which of these impacts was the larger. He seemed to see that they were comparable. I can tell the House, Mr. Speaker, that they are not comparable. The impact of, for example, the planned extra 1 million dairy cows in the intensification that is planned in this country will be equivalent to an extra 14 million human beings with all of the consequent environmental impact on our fresh water and without the treatment systems that exist for human beings. The eighth point I wanted to make, and it's one that I have made in both the first and second readings, but I want to reiterate it, is the impact that this has on our overseas visitors. This is a bill that this government is rushing into place for the Rugby World Cup. But for all those overseas visitors who are coming to visit our country, instead of the welcome mat being rolled out, instead this government's choosing to roll out a not welcome mat, a keep off the grass sign in neon lights. And so it's entirely the wrong approach. And what this government could instead have done is actually use the Sanitary Works Subsidy Scheme to recognise the fact that visitors to our country and Kiwis using the backcountry contribute very substantially, both to local economies and to our national economy. And therefore it is reasonable for local economies through territorial local authorities and for the national economy through the Sanitary Works Subsidy Scheme to fork out just a little bit to provide the extra facilities that are required in popular spots for freedom camping and to use a little bit extra to provide education about where those places are. That's exactly the approach that Tourism New Zealand was following and exactly the approach that this government ought to have continued to follow had it not lost its nerve. This is a bad bill, sir. It is bad from start to finish, and this House and this country will regret it.
Kelvin Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.